Welcome to the Business Bravery podcast, inspiring stories from coaches and course creators to help you do the next brave thing in your business. Coming up on the Business Bravery podcast.
Do I want to keep playing small and keep playing according to other people's rules? Or do I want to step into my bravery and have the courage to kind of live life my way, even though it's going to scare other people around me? Because when we do things that are outside our comfort zone, they're often outside of other people's comfort zones too. And that can then influence the conversations that we have with people, the momentum of that bravery of saying yes to myself over and over again. Has it been easy? Fuck no. Am I allowed to swear on this?
Yeah, go for it.
But it has not been easy, it's been really, really hard. And there's been a lot of, tears and a lot of questioning, because it keeps bringing up those old stories of, when things get hard, it brings up old stories of, am I good enough? Am I doing the right thing? Should I just be playing it safe? Because if I was playing it safe, then I wouldn't be feeling this way. It wouldn't be so hard. Generally, the theme through society is that we're reinforced to push our needs down, that our needs don't matter. Other people's needs are prioritized over ours. And whether that's through parenting, whether that's through just society more generally, that then is a breeding ground for us to kind of push that voice down, push that no down, because we don't trust ourselves. We've been taught not to trust or not to listen to that voice, because that voice that you're saying no to is your authentic self, right? And when we squash that down and we say yes to everyone else, we're then saying no to who we truly are.
I'm your host, Tiffany Gilleland, an Australian business and mindset coach with 10 years experience in online marketing and the creator of the Brave Launch Framework. I help coaches like you to be brave so you can stop dreaming and start doing that next big brave step and finally make more impact and get more clients. From speaking on camera to selling to launching, my approach to bravery helps you take bigger leaps without the mindset spirals. It's the secret ingredient to bigger results. Today, I'm talking to Eloise Tomkins, an embodiment coach based in Melbourne, Australia. As a powerful female voice and expert in psychology, she teaches women how to live the life they imagined by tuning into their intuition and unlocking their potential. She sparks real change through her unique approach to nervous system regulation and encourages women to find true worth in themselves. Standing firmly as a leader in a male-dominated world, she challenges patriarchy with her bold and unapologetic voice. We had an amazing discussion about people-pleasing, saying yes to yourself, how women are encouraged to ignore their own wants, needs, and boundaries, and even the male-dominated language we take for granted. Eloise shares stories about investing in herself to start her coaching business, creating boundaries in one-way relationships, and how that affected her, as well as her amazing membership, the She Series, which is a supportive community space to learn the skills of saying yes to yourself. I can't wait to share with you Eloise's stories of business bravery, past, present, and future. Now, who's ready for some business bravery inspiration? Let's dive in. Hi everyone, I am here with the amazing Eloise Tomkins, and she is an amazing coach with a background in psychology. She's going to tell us all of this good stuff that she's working on, and I'm so excited. Some of her content that has absolutely inspired me has been around people pleasing, which is something that I've been working on for a long time in my life. I was like a gold champion of people pleasing. Some other cool stuff she's got going on, membership, all kinds of stuff. I am going to hand over to her so that she can tell us her stuff in her own words. Eloise, thank you for joining me today, and let me know, tell us about your business, what you do, and what brave things you're working on at the moment.
Hi, Tiff. It's so good to be here. And gosh, the people pleasing thing, I think that is so big in terms of just what that means and how that shows up in people's lives, and also the ongoing work to kind of do around that. So yeah, I totally feel you on that. And I guess speaking to that, that's part of the reason why I got into what I do. So my background is in psychology. I trained as a psychologist, and I've been working in that space for around 10 years. so I have quite a lot of knowledge on human motivation and behavior. And what I found was we would often focus a lot on the deficit model, we'd be focusing a lot on people being psychologically unwell. But then I'd see people like, you and I, who may not necessarily have a diagnosable mental health concern, but we're still people, we're still humans. And we do struggle sometimes with that people pleasing, or we do, have these things that can hold us back in business and in life. And that's what led me to start my own coaching business and my own membership, the She series, which is all designed around the people pleasing woman who is on paper seems like they've got everything. They seem like they've got all of the boxes ticked, but internally are feeling really overwhelmed and anxious and stressed. So that's kind of how I got into this space. And I think the brave thing for me was, coming also from that background of a people pleaser, was being able to step into that and shifting. It almost had to be a little bit of a shifting of identity, going from I can't to actually I can. And all of that mental stuff that holds everyone. Like, we all have our own mental stuff. Everyone's got it, and it looks different. It feels different for everyone, but we all still have it. So I guess the brave thing for me was being able to separate that from my identity to be able to take the steps forward to create my business. So that's kind of a long-winded answer, but I guess it also gives a little bit of context about some of the skills that I have and also how I got to be in this space.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I love long-winded answers. Like, it always, like, I'm here.
I can be long-winded.
Yeah, it's all good. And I really like the part that you said about the moving from I can't to I can. I was wondering if you could maybe give an example of something you were dealing with in that shift. Just, I imagine that could be something that I know I definitely have dealt with. And yeah, just like for me, like I've had anxiety and stuff like that. And yeah, just love to hear more about that.
Yeah, I remember that life was just kind of going. Life was just kind of chugging along. And I remember that I had a great job and I loved the job. I loved the work. And there were still things that I hadn't achieved, like at the time, hadn't got entered the property market. But in a lot of other areas of my life, I was doing quite well. And I was still kind of like a little bit lost and not quite fulfilled. And there'd always been something inside of me that kind of whispered, Ellie, there's more for you. And I'd always kind of quietened that. I'd always kind of pushed that down and didn't really listen to it because I always wanted to play safe. And, me and my psychologist background, I know where that comes from. That's kind of my dad's voice in there saying, oh, you better be safe. You better be safe. Don't take risks. And I'd held on to that so tightly because it felt really familiar. It felt really safe. But it also squashed down that other part of me, which was kind of my authentic self, of being able to do these brave things and take these brave risks. And I just remember, so I set an intention every year just to kind of help, like as a reflection on the year that was and a reflection on the year to come. I think, what's going to pull me further this year? And so I decided that my intention for 2022 was going to be along the lines of saying yes to things that maybe felt a little bit scary and a little bit overwhelming. And to say yes to myself, I guess, was the overarching intention or the overarching theme. And I ended up finding this retreat, and it was life-changing because it was a time that I said yes to myself. I invested money into myself, and it wasn't a cheap retreat. It was in this luxury 5-star resort, so it wasn't cheap. And so for me, that was like a lot of already challenging a lot of my beliefs about I can versus I can't. And doing that then opened up so many more doors, because as soon as I said yes to myself and allowed myself to say yes to myself, I realized that I could do it and it was okay and I would still be safe. So that was, I don't know, a really pivotal moment that took a lot of work, I think, to get to that point. And the work that I talk about is through coaching and therapy and self-reflection and all of that kind of stuff. But yeah, that was certainly a big brave step that I took.
Yeah, that's awesome and so powerful too. Just want to paint a picture for me. So you're in a 5-star resort. Where were you, if you don't mind me asking? You don't have to tell resort name, but
yeah,
were you in another country? Did you go like somewhere, or in Melbourne, or what?
Gosh, no, definitely not in Melbourne. It was a nice sunny resort in Queensland, in Port Douglas.
Nice.
And it was amazing. We had our own pool in our villa and the food was just incredible. Like, we were really spoiled. And it was a resort that I'd wanted to stay at for, a long time. It was gorgeous. I'd never stayed in anywhere so luxurious before. And it was just such an incredible feeling to say yes to myself. And I think for a lot of my life, I'd never said yes to myself. I'd always said yes to other people's rules, which is, coming to that people-pleasing side of things. And then through doing that, it made me realize that I was saying no to myself. And I kind of got to this point where I was like, I'm not going to share my age, but, heading towards the 40. And I was like, how am I going to live the second half of my life? Like, I've only got one life. How do I want to live that? Do I want to keep playing small and keep playing according to other people's rules? Or do I want to step into my bravery and have the courage to kind of live life my way, even though it's going to scare other people around me? Because, when we do things that are outside our comfort zone, they're often outside of other people's comfort zones too. And that can then influence the conversations that we have with people. Like, I know when I have conversations with people, friends, for example, who don't run their own business, have no interest in running their own business, they will often talk about things like, oh, but that's so risky. Why are you doing that? Don't you want the security of a 9-to-5 job? And that's all their fears and insecurities. And so saying yes to yourself requires a lot of bravery, because there's going to be, or there has been, and there will be pushback. And to kind of be able to come home to yourself and know that you're going to be okay regardless has been like, it was just such an incredibly powerful thing for me to do.
Wow. Yeah, I can imagine that, actually. And just because I've been going through some similar stuff, although it hasn't involved a 5-star resort yet, but maybe I'll let my husband know that's what
definitely needed.
But yeah, I mean, I lived up in Cairns and have obviously been to Port Douglas and seen some of those resorts and had friends who ran them and stuff. So yeah, I can just imagine, I can feel that. So just in that resort that you're at, like, what was your first steps that you were planning? Like, what happened when you got home, or were you planning your steps while you were there? I'm doing long-winded questions too, sorry.
That's all right, we're a match made in heaven. I don't know, like, I think it was just that opening of the door. Like, it was just that opening of, it's okay to say yes to yourself. And when you say yes to yourself, good things happen. It feels good to say yes to yourself, and yourself knows what you want. And I mean, I don't think that necessarily needs to be a 5-star resort, or it definitely doesn't have to be that. I think for me, because there's my own money story tied up in that as well, around you've got to kind of be frugal. And so splurging on that retreat, it kind of challenged that money belief as well. And so I guess challenging some of those beliefs that I held around some of the stories that I held about myself. I'm not worthy to go on the retreat. I'm not worthy of spending money on myself. I have to be a particular way in the world because that's how other people expect me to be. Challenging all of that through going to the retreat, attending the retreat, really then allowed me to bring that into my life more so. Because at that time I was kind of contemplating, I'm enjoying my work, my salary job, and I know that there's more that I want to achieve in life. And I think the retreat just kind of, or the process of like saying yes to myself, allowed me to say yes to myself in other ways. And that's when, and it's kind of like that manifesting side of things where you open yourself up, and people talk about it to the universe, and I'm like, no, that's not how I see it. It's very much a psychological process, in the sense of when you have a growth mindset and recognize that you can grow and you can learn, and it's just a matter of building on your skills, then you'll see opportunities that kind of align with that, and you'll grab them. And so I found my business coach not long after that. And it was just kind of serendipitous, you know, like I'd come home from the retreat and seen something on Instagram or Facebook about a psychologist turned coach, and had just said yes to myself for the retreat. And I was like, oh, what's this? And she was kind of speaking to this idea that psychologists could do things a little bit differently. We could make a huge impact on the world. And I was like, oh, that sounds really cool, and said yes to that. And so I think the retreat, combined with my intention, allowed me to say yes to myself again. And it's kind of allowed me to keep the momentum of that bravery of saying yes to myself over and over again. Has it been easy? Fuck no. Am I allowed to swear on this?
Yeah, go for it.
But it has not been easy, you know, like it's been really, really hard. And there's been a lot of, you know, tears and a lot of questioning, because it keeps bringing up those old stories of, you know, when things get hard, it brings up old stories of, am I good enough? Am I doing the right thing? Should I just be playing it safe? Because if I was playing it safe, then I wouldn't be feeling this way. Like it wouldn't be so hard. And then something positive will happen, and I'm like, oh, no, I'm on the right track, you know. And yeah, it's really delicate balance, I think, of kind of finding my brave.
Oh man, that's so powerful, that like finding your bravery through that. And yeah, I just, sorry, I had something I was going to say and I'm kind of losing the thread of it, just because I'm like, oh yeah, I can just feel those steps that you went through and that kind of stuff, probably because I've been going through some similar stuff of my own around that sort of stuff. And yeah, especially like stepping into being more brave, or yeah, I don't know why that's the thing that calls to me, but since starting this podcast, it's like been that similar thing of saying yes to myself, and I just hadn't heard it in those words. Thank you for that. It's so powerful to me, just even thinking about it that way. But this is what I was going to say. Just I spent years just trying to do it the other way, just like sort of trying to say no to that little voice, the whispers and all that. And I ended up being so miserable. Like it ends up like, it might be difficult working our way through this kind of thing, at least from my experience, it's difficult walking this path, but it was 10 times more difficult trying to be in a job and do the normal stuff that everybody else wants to do. Does that make sense? Like for, you know, like in my life experience, like, you know, like, yes, I have a husband, but we don't have kids. That's not the way life has worked out for us, that sort of thing. And just that sort of the things that everybody else, it seems easy for them to make happen. Like that hasn't been my life experience, but I'm still like enjoying it on this side of things. I'm just, I don't know, from my perspective.
Yeah, and I think you know, I hear you on a lot of that, and I think what I hear, or what I take from that, or how like, is this idea that as women we're very much conditioned, so socially conditioned from a very young age, and you know, that's kind of what I talk about in the membership, is in that sense of women from a very young age are conditioned through our like experience being parented, through school, through just the fact that we're born a female, to be, you know, the good girl, praised for being quiet and wearing, you know, particular types of clothing, particular colors, playing with particular toys, being told that our job is to be the nurturer, whereas little boys are told very much the opposite. You know, they're kind of said, oh, boys will be boys when they go and, be silly or when they break something. Whereas if that was a girl, like there's very different responses. And of course, that's not going to be everyone's experience. There are going to be variations within that. But generally, the theme through society is that we're reinforced to push our needs down, that our needs don't matter. Other people's needs are prioritized over ours. And whether that's through parenting, whether that's through just society more generally, that then is a breeding ground for us to kind of push that voice down, push that no down, because we don't trust ourselves. We've been taught not to trust or not to listen to that voice, because that voice that you're saying no to is your authentic self, right? And when we squash that down and we say yes to everyone else, we're then saying no to who we truly are, because society very much tells women that there's only one way to be a woman, and that's to be skinny and attractive and to almost be this like submissive, not too confident, but not too confident, ambitious, but not too ambitious, because we don't want to intimidate men, because they need to be the breadwinner and they need to be the one, all of these gender stereotypes. And yes, I realize I'm stereotyping quite extremely here. And again, disclaimers, obviously this isn't everyone, but it is the general theme of things, and that impacts how we go about the world. And then when things happen like children or lack of, or reaching almost 40 and not being in the property market, or gosh, in my case, finding out that, or not finding out, but kind of listening to that voice and being like, oh, by the way, you're gay later in life, it's kind of, or allowing yourself to step into that identity because you've squashed it down because of all of these things that society has told you should be. It can be really tricky to then listen to that. And yes, it's brave kind of stepping into that and listening to that voice, but it's also not easy, because we're having to undo so much other stuff as well. And I could talk so much more about that, like in terms of just how it impacts our nervous system, and how being a woman like just impacts our nervous system so much that we don't feel safe in our bodies to listen to that part of ourselves.
Hey, this is Fugitive here, jumping in for a quick moment to ask you, what is that next big brave step for you in your coaching business? Is it the podcast? Maybe the workshop or challenge? Perhaps it's just getting your first paying clients, or simply getting on camera. Whatever it is, you've been dreaming about it for some time, and when you go to get started, that's when other things come up. Family stuff, or clients need more support, or there's a room that needs decluttering. Whatever that is, there's a part of you that knows how amazing it would feel to finally be brave and get that dream project out into the world. You know it would get people talking about you, and it would lead to more clients. But you don't know how to start, how to make it happen, and how to make it a success. That's where I can help you to use my 10 years of experience in online marketing and my skills in managing your mind, so you can make that big leap without the mindset spirals, so you can find the time and the energy to make your dreams come true. I have a few but limited slots open in July for free 45-minute strategy calls, so you can create a plan to get your dream project out into the world without the stress, the overwhelm, and the burnout. Come and find me at tiffanygstudios.com or message me over on Instagram at tiffanygstudios. That's TIFFANY, G for golf, STUDIOS. No spaces, no underscores, no capitals, and DM me over there, and you can send me the word strategy call to get started. Thanks for listening, and let's get back to the podcast. Wow. Yeah, absolutely. Man, I've seen you talk about this on your content on your Instagram and stuff too. And yeah, it kind of always blows me away, these messages that, I mean, in my experience, that I picked up. And yeah, just, oh, man, Sorry.
There's so many
Yeah,
many messages
that I picked up without thinking is what I'm trying to say, that I didn't even realize until
yeah
you're like, hey, did you know that we've got some of these things going on? And it's like, oh yeah, we do, don't we? Yeah.
and that's the thing, like it's so, and that's why I'm so passionate about like this membership, because I want to help women see these things, and I want us to kind of just see them for what they are, because I think a lot of women, like they'll come and see me and they'll be like, oh, I'm feeling stressed, I'm feeling overwhelmed, but then I feel really guilty when I try and set boundaries and say no to taking on more work because my boss wants me to take on more higher workload, but I feel guilty for saying no and telling them that I don't have the capacity. Or they'll come in and they'll be like, oh, my partner always wants to go out on the weekend. They're very much an active person, but I just want to lay in bed and like watch TV because that's how I unwind after a busy week. But I feel guilty for doing that. And I worry that my partner will leave me if I like say that I want to watch TV instead of going rock climbing every second weekend. And I'm like, oh my gosh, these are things that we learn, because we've learned that, particularly with men, if it's a man, it's harder for us to assert our needs because we've been conditioned to prioritize their needs over our own. And one of the things I like to remind women is that it's not our fault. We've learned this, and because we've learned this, it can be unlearned. It's okay to kind of explore a different way of being, and it's not going to make you a bad person or an unkind or a not nice person. You can be nice and kind and friendly and still not go rock climbing with your partner every second weekend, and they're not going to leave you. Well, if they do leave you, then that's on them.
Yeah, and it's having maybe like for my side of things, the bravery, but also that saying yes to yourself, and the bravery to say yes to yourself in that situation, and know that whatever happens, you'll be all right through that, like but you're at least being you. And because like when you do say to your partner, oh yeah, I'll go rock climbing even though you don't want to, and like I've been in that relationship too, it's just like you're saying no to yourself. Like it feels worse. Like, I mean, it becomes learned behavior, I guess, but then once you start actually, well, for me, once I started actually turning around and saying, actually, no, I don't want to do that, and feeling safe enough to do that, it's so powerful, that shift. And
and I think being able to anchor yourself in that as well, like being able to almost anchor yourself in the knowledge that you will be okay. And I think for me that has also been like a really big brave shift, because being able to anchor within myself rather than anchoring in what I thought other people wanted has been, I guess, powerful, because you can then kind of, regardless of what happens around you, and I think this is something that happens a lot with the women that I work with, is that there's a lot of looking to external things to kind of, oh, well, if work is going okay, then I'm okay. If my partner's happy, then I'm happy. And it kind of then becomes, if work's okay, I need to say yes to my boss giving me that task, because if I say no, then work's not going to be okay. My boss will be angry. And it becomes very external. It becomes about, okay, I need to try and manage the work situation, or I need to try and manage the partner situation, so that we kind of think we've got more influence over things than we actually do. And if we kind of recognize that the external stuff might rock the boat a little, so to speak, with the boat being us or our emotions, but if we're got an anchor and we're anchored down, then it doesn't really matter if we get rocked a little bit, because we're still going to be anchored. We're still going to be anchored in ourselves. With people pleasers, I remember times, and it sounds like you've had this experience as well, being unanchored and kind of trying to stay kind of afloat by saying yes to things that you didn't want to, or doing things that you didn't really want to do. I don't know if this analogy is making sense. Like I kind of can visualize it in my head, this little boat with me on the boat and all of these things like kind of like trying to push me off the boat. I'm not sure if I'm conveying that, but that's kind of my thought process there.
Yeah, I get that actually. I can I wouldn't have thought about it that way in those terms while it was happening, because that's the thing, like for me it was just stuff that I learned in childhood, and I thought it was the way everybody operated. Like the time when I actually sat down with somebody qualified like yourself and they sort of pointed out, oh, actually, it doesn't have to be like that. You can say no. It's like, what? How do you do that without being a bitch, or all those sorts of things? And for me, like it wasn't even the things that I thought other people would say. It was the voice inside my head that judged everything and what it would say, if that made sense. So yeah, it's just, but yeah, the man in the boat, or you in the boat. Sorry.
Yep. The person in the boat. Yeah, yes, yeah.
Sorry, the person in the boat. Yep. I don't know why I said the man in the boat, but yeah.
But can I just point out, like, this is what I mean though, like, everything always goes back, like, even the term guys, like, we're very quick to use male-oriented phrases, like the man in the boat, or hey guys, how are you going? And it's a very conditioned thing, and I think it's an example of like where the patriarchy is literally everywhere. And so it makes sense that those beliefs that you have, or that voice that's kind of in your head, is very much built around that. And I think we all have that inner voice, or that inner critic, that is built around that. And I say to my partner, she can be very hard on herself, and particularly around feeling like she hasn't achieved enough in the day. And I'm like, holy moly, you haven't achieved enough? Like, you've done so much around the house. And it just baffles me. And she'll be like, yeah, no, I think I've been lazy. I've been really lazy. And I'm like, babe, I think that's your mum's voice coming out. I don't think that's, I think that's your mum's voice that's saying that you're lazy. And because our parents are such a fundamental part of our lives from such a young age, when our brains haven't developed. So their voices become really influential. And we don't have, like, when we're born, we don't have a voice, we don't have language yet. And that develops through our experiences. And if we're constantly being told these things by our parents, so we then bring those voices in as our own, which then, depending on our parents, can become, and how our parents kind of spoke to us, can then become our own inner critics.
Yeah, definitely for me, my inner critic for a long time was definitely my father's voice. So yeah, I definitely 100% get that for sure.
Mine's my father as well.
Yeah.
Don't you just want to be like, oh geez, thanks parents, thanks so much for that. But this is the stuff that we talk about though in the membership, because these are all things that you and I are both talking about. This, I'm talking about this with my partner, like in the sense of sharing that experience with her. And I think it's something that happens for everyone. We just don't talk about it because we, like you said, just think it's normal. And sometimes we reach, I guess, a bit of a breaking point, which looks a little bit different for everyone. And like for me, it was, I know there's more for me in life than this. I was doing well, like my life was great, but I wanted more. And that was my kind of tipping point. And I think that when we do the work, we get to know ourselves a lot better, and we can find that there can be a different way. And I think that's really brave, because I know, like in my family, I mean, my family's a little dysfunctional. I say little air quotes, dysfunctional. And there are people in my family who won't do the work. They won't do that inner reflection, because that will be hard. That'll mean that they lose connections with some of their family members, because doing the work can be isolating in some ways. What was I going with this train of thought? But I guess on the flip side of that, there's a different type of brave, which is kind of, what life do I want for myself, and how can I be true to myself? And I think that's the kind of women that I work with, is the women that are wanting more from their life, wanting to really step into who they are, and also who they want to be, and being able to draw on their strengths and strengthen their relationships with their loved ones, and not being a bitch by doing so, like learning that they can strengthen those relationships, and in actuality being able to say no and set boundaries and be assertive. Can I ask, did that make your relationships worse, or did it make them better?
Yeah, I mean, let me just think about that actually. So like for some of the relationships, it didn't, how do I say this, like for some of the relationships, the people on the other side, like it was like a one-way relationship. And so because I had been the people pleaser and let them, control the flow of everything, then when I turned around and sort of said, actually, no, I don't want to do that, and I'm not an automatic yes, and things like that. So some people weren't too happy with that. And so then they would pull back to go and find the people that they needed for what they were going through, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And yeah, but then for other people, like it has definitely strengthened relationships, especially like with my mother and stuff like that. It just, it's like finding those boundaries and things like that. It definitely helped me. And I don't regret doing it, and I wouldn't change it. And I'm still even building those muscles and learning those skills in some situations, because sometimes I still run into these people or something like that where it's like I'm playing out old stuff. So yeah, and then it's like, oh, hang on a minute, I'm here again. And it's like, okay, I know what I need to do. I need to set my boundaries again and things like that. So yeah, that's definitely my experience. Yeah, how about yourself?
Yeah, very much the same. And I love that. Like, I was curious to hear how it kind of played out for you, like, because I think one of the things that women will talk to me about is, well, if I say no or set boundaries or speak assertively, then people are not going to like me. And that's like the worst thing in the world that can happen. And it's interesting to hear from your perspective, because I think the same happened to me. Is I kind of like lost friendships. And in hindsight, like you look back on that and you think, okay, well, they weren't the great friendships anyway, because like you said, they were one-sided. What were you getting out of it? They were probably getting more out of it than you. And when you started setting boundaries, they, probably went, oh, well, this isn't serving me anymore. I liked it when you just said yes to everything, or I liked it when I got my way all the time. And at the same time, it can also strengthen our relationships, even with family members. And I think that's the cool thing to see, is that it really can strengthen our relationships. And I know for me, like one of the boundaries that I set was with my mum, and she wasn't able to meet me at my boundary. And it becomes really difficult, because it's like, well, what do you do when people don't step into, or not step into, but don't respect your boundary? And I think we often think, well, if somebody's not respecting our boundary, I need to keep telling them, I need to keep letting them know this is my boundary. And I think it becomes more about us. Like with my mum, I was like, okay, you're not able to respect my boundary, I can't have contact with you. I need to set that boundary, and this is my line. You're not able to respect that, and this is the consequence of that. I think sometimes we think boundaries can be, I'm going to keep telling them and 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 telling them. And then it just becomes a pattern of, like we keep doing the same things and giving too many anyway, I'm going like down the line of boundaries, but I think it's just this thing, like we can really strengthen our relationships with ourselves, and in through strengthening our relationship with ourselves, it strengthens our relationship with other people, or shows us that by respecting ourselves and being able to say yes to ourselves, other people might not be able to meet us, including family members. And that's okay, because we are still worthy of establishing our boundaries and our needs and saying yes to ourselves, even if other people don't match that.
Yeah. Oh man, it's so amazing that we're talking about this stuff. Like, when I started this whole thing about bravery and things like that, I didn't like it does involve this work, but I didn't even think about like this kind of stuff coming up as much. But it's definitely some of like the foundations and the building blocks of being able to be brave is understanding those boundaries and navigating those relationships. And I just remember the first time I started setting a boundary, like typing a message, and I'm shaking while I'm doing it, and there was like so many practice ones on the notepad and everything, because it was like it was not the easiest thing, but still I'm so glad that like I built those skills, because then it's allowed me to do other brave things, and it's shown my brain that I can do hard things, and it's like, oh, okay, actually I can do other hard things and things in my business and some of that stuff too. But I mean, so much of business is navigating relationships, right? Like, you know, businesses are built on the relationships and things like that. That's how people decide to work with you, especially as a coach. And so understanding these boundaries with, you know, potential clients and things like that, like there's so much value in understanding where your own boundaries are and that kind of thing too. So
they're definitely skills, you know, and I think that going back to like that social conditioning, we're not encouraged as women to have boundaries. We're actively encouraged to not have them. And that's kind of scary.
Yeah.
That's really scary. Boundaries around our body, boundaries around our thoughts, boundaries around what we enjoy, boundaries around what we talk about, boundaries around our time, sexual boundaries, like intellectual boundaries. Like there are so many different types of boundaries, and we're just not taught from a very young age to have them. Yeah, it's kind of scary when you think about it. It's kind of scary, because then we become adults who essentially have learned all of this in childhood, and if we don't deal with it, and that again, that's not to say like everyone has their stuff, like every single person has stuff. And I work with women who, like I said, don't necessarily have a diagnosable mental health condition, but have been conditioned as a female, as a woman in the world, and therefore have some of these things that are going on for them that hold them back. Because, like, for example, I'm working with, or had been working with someone who was in a high level position and had stepped into that role and was struggling to have difficult conversations with team members because of that fear of not being liked. And even though they're in kind of a senior level position and we're doing well in other areas of the, like in every other single area, having conversations was really difficult. And so we did a lot of work around that in terms, and you were saying like, you know, how you'd sit there and like practice the writing out the text messages. That's all stuff that we would do, you know, like kind of building up that muscle, building up that skill through doing visualizations or role playing or writing those scripts and things like that, so that we can kind of develop that skill together so that we can then go out and be able to do that in real life. Because yeah, bravery, I don't necessarily think is just going out there and doing it. I think we've also got to do it in respect to our nervous system as well. And sometimes our nervous system needs time to get to that ultimate level of brave that we want to get to. But being brave can often be just kind of taking that first step.
100%, that the first step, and even realizing that there's something that you want to change and make different as well. Like it's just even some of those things and just those realizations can be, like, at least from my perspective, brave. Like for me, that's something that I find affirming and just tapping into that side of bravery. But yeah, definitely, like you said earlier, saying yes to yourself as well. Like I like it from your perspective as well. So Yeah.
Well, I think when we say no to everyone else, say yes to everyone else, sorry, who are we saying no to?
Yeah.
Or what are we saying no to?
Yeah.
And why is it that we don't say yes to ourselves? Like, why do we kind of put ourselves at the bottom of the pile?
Yeah.
And what do you want, like, if you were to think about, this sounds really morbid, but your funeral, what do you want people to say about you? And what are they going to say? Like, you're going to get to your funeral and people be like, they were a yes person. They said yes to everyone. Or do you want your funeral to be, they were an adventure seeker. They lived life to the fullest and they really knew themselves and didn't let anything hold them back. I kind of know what and I kind of know what I would want at at that stage at the end of my life.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's so powerful. I hadn't thought about it like that before from that perspective. And actually, from my experience, all that time I spent being the yes person, the people at my funeral, they probably wouldn't even turn around and say she was a yes person. They'd be sitting there talking about themselves because they wouldn't know anything about me because I just agreed with everything they said, regardless of what I thought. Do you know what I mean? Like, maybe that's even more morbid. I hadn't thought about it that way.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because and again, this is why I love doing the work that I do, because like I can see the shifts that even we've had in this conversation, like the kind of like, oh yeah, I hadn't thought about it that way. And like that's why I love this work, because the work that I do, because being able to offer people the ability to kind of see that there can be a different way, that life can be easier, life can be calm. It doesn't have to be anxious or overwhelming or stressful all the time. Sure, we're going to experience stress, anxiety, and overwhelm because we're humans. And sometimes it's going to come up, but it doesn't have to be every single day, or it doesn't have to be the anxiety that you feel before you go into work, knowing that you're going to have a chat with your boss and like throwing up in the toilets, right before the meeting, which is something that a lot of my clients will talk to me about. They're like, oh my gosh, Ellie, I just feel so anxious that like I spent like half an hour in the toilets before the meeting, just like trying to ground myself and not have a panic attack. And I'm like, that's cool. It doesn't have to be that way. we can look at that and, let go of some of those thoughts and behaviors that contribute to that. And yeah, I think I don't know. I love the work that I do. I could talk about it all day.
Likewise, and I'm enjoying this conversation. And I was chuckling before just because I just remember that anxiety and stress that I used to have way more on the daily. Like, I'd get a message from a boss, be like, hey, too funny to talk to you. And my first immediate thought would always be, I'm going to get fired, even though I was the overachiever in the office and had done so far as it's just, I mean, I wasn't quite throwing up in the toilets level, but it was definitely, and then you get in there and it's just, he'd be giving me more work. It's just like, I've just got more work for you, because you do everything. And oh man,
which then also brings about more stress and anxiety as well, doesn't it? Because you're like, oh my gosh, like, how do I say no to this? Well, I can't say no because that feels too overwhelming, and I'll just take on the more work. Which then perpetuates that cycle, and that's kind of the thing. Like, where can we almost, I don't know an analogy here, throw a stick into the cog so that we can stop that spin, like that constant spin, so that we can kind of break that cycle. And I think sometimes we start with like a little tiny like twig that the cog just keeps on spinning. But then over time, we start to learn how to slow that cog down so that we can actually make sustainable long-term changes. And yeah, it's great to hear that you have done so much work on this with yourself, because it's not easy. And I think, this is part of why I created a membership as well, rather than, because I contemplated like just, like a coaching package, a one-on-one coaching package, but it didn't sit right with me. Well, it did, but it didn't. I think the thing is that I was realizing is that people pleasing, it does take time. It's not a 1 month, 2 months thing that we can just kind of go, okay, it's done. It comes up throughout your life in different ways, in different situations. When you see someone from, you know, a previous period in your life and you haven't had much contact with them. And I wanted something that women could come to and be part of a community where it was very much around that community support from like-minded women, where we could cheer each other along, where we can support each other, where you've had a situation where you've bumped into that friend and you're like, oh, fuck, I've gone back into old habits and I didn't do the boundary thing. And I said yes to this thing that I didn't mean to say yes to. What do I do? And be able to support each other through that. Also supporting each other's wins, you know, like maybe the alternative happened. Hey, I bumped into these old people and they wanted to catch up for a coffee and I actually don't want to see them anymore. So I was like, oh no, that sounds really great, but you know what? I'm okay. I'm good. No, thanks. And being able to celebrate that win as well, because I think healing very much happens when people come together and connect in groups. And I think that we're very disconnected in society. So that's part of the reason. And yeah, I don't know, like the one-on-one just didn't fit with that. I wanted to offer something that was more community focused. So yeah, sorry, just thinking about that. And I was like, why, you know, like, and I think that was also brave for me as well, you know, like going back to that bravery, because when I started my coaching business, I very much took ideas on what other people were doing in this space, and other people were doing, you know, 12-month masterminds. And I was like, even then I was like, well, I don't know how that sits with me. That's not really what I want to do. And then another coach was like, oh, slide into people's DMs and try and solve via Instagram in their DMs. And I was like, that's not really the relationship building that I want to do. And it just kept feeling wrong. And so I was like, maybe this business thing, I'm not cut out for it. And I think you and I had spoken about this. I remember messaging you on Instagram and I was like, this feels really hard, like this whole business thing. And I remember you saying, it's really not that hard. And after that, like I was kind of reflecting that I needed to come back to myself because it was hard because I was trying to not copy, because I don't think I was trying to copy, but I was trying to use or do the coaching in a way that other people were doing it. In the sense of, oh, Kajabi is the best platform ever to slide into other people's DMs. And my body kept telling me, no, that doesn't feel right. And when I kind of lent back into myself and connected within myself, I was like, okay, what I really want is to bring a community of women together. And I also want to share my knowledge with them so that the more people that have this knowledge, the more women can be empowered to be confident and to know themselves so deeply that they don't care what other people think, which will then strengthen their relationships with everyone else because their relationship with themselves is really strong. And that's where I was like, this membership is the bomb. Because that's how I'm going to make the biggest impact, and that's how I can reach the people that I want to reach in a sustainable way that's not going to cost, you know, a shitload of money for clients. And when I sort of made that decision, which to me that felt really brave, because coming back to myself can sometimes not feel brave. Like it sometimes can feel easier to listen to those external cues. So kind of coming back to myself was really brave because and it feels right and it feels good and exciting, you know. And I think that's the thing about being able to come back home to yourself, is that it can feel really exciting to know who you truly are. I think I've waffled a little bit there, but I'm just kind of reflecting on that, you know, like
but I mean that's the kind of stuff, the kind of work that lights me up with my clients, because I had a similar thing where like I spent thousands working with a coach to do a launch and things like that to launch my coaching, and like she had one system, one approach, and it didn't suit me. And I spent the whole time going, oh no, but I've spent money on her, and she would say, you spent money on me, you invested in me. It's because you want to change, and I want, I have the results that you want, and some of this stuff, which actually doesn't light me up in any way, shape, or form now. But at that time, I didn't know what I didn't know. And and so then obviously I had this thought and just was going through that whole thing with that it's not right, like what you were saying, it's not right. And obviously I didn't have a successful launch in terms of sales. I did build a community of people, but I didn't get sales. And then the next time around, when I did it on my own and found my own, that fun way through, and like for me, the parts that light me up, and that's what I love doing with my clients, like even if they're not launching, but just helping them to just find that way that works for them, because that's the fun part. Like there's 100 different answers to how do we make this business thing work. And for every rule, I've seen somebody break that rule and make tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars. So that means there are no rules, and that can be scary, but also fun. And I love that. That's the part like of Bravery where I thought all of this stuff was going to go, but there's just so many more layers to it as I've been diving into it, and just all of these foundations and all of those skills you built saying yes to yourself then allowed you to say yes to yourself for your business. Like, do you kind of see, like, I mean, that's kind of what you were saying with that reflection, but I got excited.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. And I don't even think it has to be business related. Like, I mean, but I hear you, like that's absolutely my experience. Like my experience has certainly been business related, but at the same time, like I also see it just in terms of strengthening relationships, like by saying yes to myself. Like I met my partner, and probably wouldn't have done that had I not said yes to myself. By saying yes to myself, like I now have a regular spot on a radio show where I'm able to talk about the things that I'm passionate on and share that with a huge audience, which is really cool. Because at the end of the day, I want to help people, and the more people that I can help, like that is incredible, and I wouldn't have been able to do these things and help the people that I help had I have not said yes to myself. And I mean, I don't know, like I look back and I'm like, what are the disadvantages of saying yes to myself and being brave and kind of putting myself first? Because I think sometimes we think putting ourselves first can be selfish, and shifting how we see that can be really, really powerful, because saying yes to myself has actually made me be able to help more people and to do more good in the world. Whereas if I kept saying yes to other people, I wouldn't have been able to do that. I would have, I don't know. Like I think I've been on this path for so long now that it's hard to kind of see the alternative. I think I would have been like stuck. I would have been stuck in a dysfunctional like dynamic with family members and working in unsatisfying jobs and kind of just trying to keep maintaining the status quo. Whereas now I can say that I truly am happy, and so that's why again I'm passionate about the work that I do, because I want to help women reach that point of like actual happiness rather than just kind of faking the confidence until they don't make it, because I don't think that faking it brings you anything.
Yeah, 100%. It's interesting. I see some people in personal relationships where they're doing the faking it thing, and because I know them well, I kind of know what they're doing, and it's interesting seeing it from the outside now that that's sort of not the person that I am wanting to be. And no judgments to anyone or anything, like it's just it's interesting, these things that you see, and the way that I process things now, I guess, just with this extra experiences that I've had and decisions that I've made. So I can see the power in the membership as well, with having other people modeling those things and inspiring you, and you can see somebody else taking certain actions and things like that. I can definitely see that and feel that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's part of the reason why. And I think I'm also very much of the belief that, like, yes, I have psychological knowledge, and yes, I have skills in that space, and I'm really good at what I do, and I know that. and see even that, like, you know, wouldn't have been able to say that, like, that I'm good at what I do. Like, I would have been like, oh, maybe I'm okay. I don't know. But now I'm like, you know, I know that I'm good at what I do, and like I have that confidence. And but at the same time, I want the community, because people learn off each other, like you said, that behavior is modeled, and women are inherently knowledgeable, and by being able to share knowledge and experience with other people is incredible. And, you know, like the way I see it, the membership is like, down the line, I want to run like retreats and opportunities for that face-to-face connection as well, where we can kind of come together and do some healing, but also have some fun and just kind of connect in a really intentional way. Yeah, but I think maybe just the membership is my focus at the moment.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I was thinking about whether or not to ask you about like what your future Brave plans are, because you kind of talked about you're moving into coaching and things like that. So yeah, but it's interesting to hear having those retreats and things like that. Like, is how far out? Like, I mean, you got to focus on the membership first. I totally get that. So
yeah, I don't know. I know what I want things to look like in the business. Like, I want to focus at the moment definitely on building the She series and building up that community and just seeing where that goes. And I guess that's going to be like, I have my ideas, but at the same time, it's also going to be based on what women are needing and what they're wanting, because I can have all the ideas in the world, but at the same time, you know, it's going to be based on what's going to be most helpful for people. But I guess the way I see it is, I'd love to host retreats where women can have an intentional space to come, and because we often do neglect our own needs, to come and be intentional about putting ourselves first for a period of time. And I don't know, like thinking of how incredible that retreat was for me, like taking that time to go to somewhere luxurious. That's kind of my plan, is to go somewhere really nice and to, you know, be in a nice warm environment and just connect and provide that space for women to be seen, heard and held, because I think that is a lot of where the healing power comes from. And I love providing that for women. So I don't know, that's kind of one phase. As to when, I don't know what that looks like. Like, I think the thing is, what I have a tendency to do is jump, like, I like, oh, idea, I'll jump on that. Oh, another idea. Oh, I better follow that one too. And then I end up, like, you know, going down the rabbit hole. So I'm trying to rein myself in a little bit. And even though I've got these ideas that I would love to do, like I was thinking the other day, you know, oh, I'd love to host a self-love gala. I know, right? Like, for women to come and to just be like, celebrate the fact that they're women and self-love. And but then I was like, oh, maybe I could do that. And I'm like, whoa, Ellie, like, just chill a little. Come back to the here and now. And just do your thing in the here and now would be a good place to start. So I think that future planning is good, but I also know for me that sometimes it can lead me to jump too far down that rabbit hole. And
I 100% get that. I'm definitely a similar personality. Like, I can see the vision, I can see the potential. It's like, I want to do it all now, and this idea and that idea, and I just for a long time, it was very easy for me to ride the wave of starting things, and it has been some hardcore discipline to learn to finish and continue things rather than being like, that's been some of my work. So I get that, just having those ideas and just knowing, okay, it's okay, I don't have to do them right now, the time will come, and I'll know when that time comes. So I get that.
It's hard, isn't it, though? Like, I find that too, like, and I think coming, like, this idea of, you know, staying brave to myself and coming back to myself has been powerful, because I think the other ideas, like, I'd start them and then I'd be like, oh, this isn't lighting me up. Oh, I'm not vibing with this. And hence the membership, like, that lights me up, because it's me. It's 100% me. And it feels good to me. It feels good to me, and I like that. And I think that that's really important, to be able to have something that feels good to you, because I think that otherwise you're just going to end up going down all of these other garden paths. And I think sometimes even when it is your idea, sometimes there's like other shiny things that sound good, and being able to kind of bring yourself back to what it is that, or being able to complete it can be a really helpful step.
Yeah, I mean, and like sometimes there just needs to be that freedom to follow an idea and then go, oh, this isn't what I imagined it was going to be, and then sort of working through that, and do you continue? Like, I mean, I think that's all part of the process and things like that too. Like not talking about your membership at all, just mean like things that I've tried in the past, and it's like, oh, actually, this not the right idea or not the right timing, or something didn't quite click at the time. But
it's okay to quit.
Yeah,
I don't like this saying, like, I can't remember the exact saying, but like, don't quit.
Yeah.
and it's just kind of like, actually, why not? And I think it's this sunk cost fallacy, like we feel like we've got to continue with something even if it's no longer serving us. But I think as humans we grow and evolve, and I think that speaks to that bravery. We grow, we evolve, and that means that sometimes things that were working for us might no longer work for us, and that's okay. We're allowed. And it comes back to don't quit. What is that essentially saying? Don't say no. Like, it's again reinforcing almost this idea of like, don't say no.
And what's that about? That doesn't that come back to like people pleasing, but people pleasing society, or like what society expects of you? Isn't that same thing in that situation?
Exactly.
So,
and look, I mean, there's always disclaimers, because you can also talk about it in the sense of like, don't give up when things get hard if you really want it, but it's also falls back under in the sense of I don't know if it's actually not working for you. And I think that's why people stay in things that aren't serving them, because there's that societal pressure of like, well, don't give up, you haven't given it everything.
Actually, that sort of reminds me of some stories and things I've heard of people with their businesses, and they've built a business that like it's making hundreds of thousands or something like that, and it's like, oh, but I'm not enjoying this anymore, and then having that bravery to shift. And it's just sort of interesting. So okay, so next question, or coming up to the final question, is if there's somebody listening to this who's thinking about their next big brave thing, like maybe it's their membership or that kind of thing, or maybe their podcast or something like that, and they're procrastinating, they're putting it off, it doesn't feel like the right time or something like that, but they know it's something they want to do and they're struggling to do it, what advice would you give to that person who's wanting to make it happen but not able to sort of take those steps forwards for whatever reason?
My thoughts around that are, what is the block that's getting in the way, and where is that block coming from? And I think that we've spoken about some of that today. I mean, obviously the stuff that I've been talking to is kind of that inner stuff, like, those inner voices. Is it your inner voice that's kind of blocking you? Is it the feeling of fear or anxiety that's blocking you? And we've kind of got this end goal, and for example, podcast. What is overwhelming? What are the barriers that are getting in the way? So I think starting to like identify and taking stock of what is actually getting in the way for you, and working out, well, what are the smaller steps that I could take to get that thing happening? Is it that, okay, starting the podcast is probably going to be a lot. Can I look at what kind of podcasts are out there? Is there anything similar? What equipment do I need? Maybe I'll just write a list, and gradual by gradual, build up to that step, because it doesn't necessarily need to go from 0 to 100. Or it may be that it's not aligned with you, checking in with yourself and just taking, a really good, honest look inside and thinking, well, is this actually something I want? Or is it something that I think is going to help my business that I think I should be doing? Or is it actually something that, because I've thought about doing a podcast, and maybe I will in the future, but at the moment I'm like, no. It's just not, like, I don't know, it's just not, even though I can talk, so maybe it will be a good idea. I don't know. But, at the moment, it's not. And I think being able to kind of look inwards and check in with yourself, is it something that I want? Yes or no? If it's yes, okay, it's something that I really do want, then what's getting in the way? What's blocking me here? And is it that I can take little baby steps to do that, or is it that I need some support to kind of help get me on track? Because sometimes we live our life, right? Like we're kind of in it, and it can be really hard to see the forest from the trees sometimes. And I think sometimes that having that person kind of who can see that bird's eye view can be really helpful in helping us achieve our goals if we're really struggling to kind of get there. Yeah, that's kind of, again, long-winded. So I hope that's helpful.
It's definitely helpful for me. And I definitely wanted to say that I wasn't suggesting you have to have a podcast or anybody has to. It's just, that's my experience, because I dreamt about this for 3 years, and it was always like, oh, I've got to have a certain amount of income. And then I was miserable in my business. And then I started this, and now it's my version of like your membership that you're working on. It's like the thing that's like, this is it. And it's just lighting me up. And so yeah, I guess like it's just coming off with some of those examples, but yeah.
And I think, and I think I was just like feeding off that. And I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because 3 years of kind of pondering it, like, and I think that's what happens. We have these ideas, and it's like, well, no, I'm just going to squash that voice down. I'm not even going to entertain it because it's not the right time. It's not, all of these beliefs kind of pop up for us. And I think being able to, you know, hopefully this episode has helped people just kind of tune into that a little bit more, or acknowledge that we do have that there, and be mindful about what it's saying to us. Because when we can start to acknowledge that there are kind of these different parts to us, there's that part that wants the podcast, there's this part that doesn't feel safe and wants to keep us protected and secure and all of these other things, then we can start to decide, well, who gets to sit in the driver's seat? Who gets to make this decision about who wants to make the podcast? Is it the scared voice, or is it the healthy adult that's kind of like speaking right now? And yeah, that's a whole separate topic that I won't delve into. But yeah, it's I think it really is about tuning into ourselves, which is not easy. I say it flippantly, but I also acknowledge that it can really be, it's not that easy.
Yeah. Oh man, such powerful stuff. And even though like you could go into it more, I definitely know it just from having been through it, and I'm sure many people listening will get that too. So thank you so much for all of your time today, and for talking about this so openly and diving into this stuff and sharing your bravery stories. I have really appreciated your time today, and just wanted to say, of course, there'll be links in the show notes, but for those people who are like me, who are like, oh, I just want to go now and I don't want to click, where can people find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So they can find me on Instagram, Eloise Tomkins with a little underscore, or they can check out www.thesheseries.com to jump on the waitlist for when doors open.
Ooh, awesome. That's so exciting. So I'm looking forward to that, and finding out more and more about the membership and everything. It's been great talking to you about that. So thank you so much today, Eloise.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been amazing.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thanks for listening to the Business Bravery podcast. Has this episode inspired you to do something brave? Even if it's only send a difficult email, please share it with me on Instagram or other social media channels. Feel free to tag me at Tiffany G Studios. That's TIFFANY. G for golf, STUDIOS, no spaces, no underscores, etc. Or you can use the hashtag Business Bravery Podcast so that I can cheer you on, and together we can inspire other coaches and course creators to do brave things in their business and life. Now, I'm Tiffany, and I'll leave you with this one last thing. What's one brave thing you're going to do today? It doesn't have to be big. Even the smallest steps can create the most massive results. So again, feel free to share it with me either publicly or privately so that I can cheer you on. That's it from me. Until next time.